In your book, Enlightenment Now, The Case for Reason, Science, Humanism and Progress, you wrote, quote, "Over the long run, a world in which all parties refrain from war is better for everyone." How would you persuade Vladimir Putin to understand that?
Yes, well, that may be like persuading the Pope that Jesus was not the Son of God. Maybe you can't.
Why?
But, well, because it's part of his, when people get committed to something, when their reputation, their worldview depends on it, it may be impossible to persuade them out of it. We can hope that so it may be in that case, I mean, we could change the outcomes, the calculus of interests, so that if he wanted to preserve Russia's standing, Russia's prosperity, maybe he would think twice. Sometimes leaders think twice, but his own psychology may be that the worse things get, the more committed he is to show that he did not make a mistake in the first place, especially since there is a personality type, a kind of malignant narcissist that cannot possibly admit that they're ever wrong.
That's Vladimir Putin.
I think that's Vladimir Putin. You know, the mechanisms of democracy are designed so that people like that can't become leaders. In the United States, when the founders 250 years ago thought, how should we design an optimal government? They thought, well, tyrants are going to want to achieve power. How do we have mechanism that they can't, or at least they can't ruin a country based on their own psychology? In a dictatorship like Putin's Russia, that can fail, and narcissists can do huge damage. We saw that like in China, in Stalinist Soviet Union. So it can happen. That's one of the reasons democracy is so precious.
How can democracy fight that? How can democracy survive in this environment?
Well, democracies have some built-in advantages. Namely, they have a way of correcting errors. You know, Putin clearly made some huge blunders. He thought he would just walk into Ukraine and take over the whole country in a week. Russia has suffered some severe costs in deaths and injuries of soldiers, in their economy, in their international prestige. So whereas democracies, because there is freedom of speech, if the government makes a mistake, people can point out the mistake. There's a way to correct its errors. So democracies have that advantage, and that's why, likewise in China, which in many regards has been very successful in economic growth, in military growth, but their COVID policies were a little crazy and it really hurt the country. Their one-child policy led to a demographic decline. They had a crisis in overbuilding of real estate, there are economic problems, and in a dictatorship, if you punish people who criticize the government can never learn it's wrong. Now, the government can still be very strong, it can exert brute force, doesn't mean that an autocracy will fail, but that is a built-in flaw. So it's one thing that democracies have on their side. Another is people like to live in democracies. When you have immigration, when people, as they say, vote with their feet, they tend to go to democratic countries because life is better. People are happier, they live longer, they have better education, they're safer. This doesn't mean democracies will win. It just means that democracies won't necessarily lose. There are some advantages.
You also argued that it's the safest way for you to live in a safe place to have a democratic government, because there will be no room for vendetta or for the rule of the strongest, but the rule of law.
Well, yes, so the way I think of history of government is people are always, societies are always kind of poised between the violence of anarchy, where you have feuding and vendettas and raids and constant war of all against all, the kind of Hobbesian jungle, or the violence of tyranny, where you have a government that commits violence against people, and that can kill more people than people killing each other. Democracy I think of as just the government having just enough violence to prevent people from killing each other without the government itself killing its citizens. And that's what I think of democracy as poised between the violence of anarchy and the violence of tyranny. Probably the violence of anarchy is worse, and often people will welcome a dictator, surprising us in the West, in the democratic West, because they think the alternative is anarchy. One of the reasons that Russia went toward tyranny is the chaos in the post-communist era, the high rates of corruption, of crime, of homicide, of suicide, of alcoholism, led people to think our society is spiraling downward. We need a strong leader to stop it. Now, I think it's much better if you have a moderate, intelligent, democratic leader. But if the alternative is anarchy, people will accept a strongman.
Let's have a look on something that people can believe or trust. From your perspective, why do people believe in God?
Partly it's a projection of our intuitive psychology, the way we interact with each other. When I'm talking to you right now, I can't really get in your head. I don't know what you're thinking, but I assume you're thinking something. That you have thoughts, you have beliefs, you have emotions. That's just part of our nature as social beings. Now, if I think you have a mind that's separate from your body, it's kind of a short step to imagine that there are minds that are independent of bodies. So people believe in the soul, people believe in ghosts, people believe in angels and saints and gods. Combine that with another cognitive habit that we have of design. That is, we look at things like this glass. The reason that it's round is that someone designed it so that it could hold water. The reason that this is flat is so that I could put a glass on it. There was an engineer who made it the way it is. That's a habit we need to understand our human-built world. Now, again, it's very easily extended. Not just our human artifacts, but maybe the whole universe, the planet, nature, the solar system. Maybe that was designed. And so that makes belief in God come very naturally to us.
For you as a cognitive psychologist, is it good or bad that religion plays such a strong role in many parts of the world?
It's mostly bad. And I'm happy to say this here in the Czech Republic, which might be the most atheist country in the world, or at least in the democratic Western world. And it's a pretty nice place to live. And some of the places that are the most religious, like Afghanistan, are hellholes or awful places. Now, some religious institutions are constructive. Well, if you have community, if you have beauty, if you have hymns, if you have people reflecting, if you have certain moral standards like kindness and charity and generosity, to the extent that religions promote that, that is a positive. Although you don't need religions to promote that. And often religions can promote a lot of toxic things as well. So I think we have to pull out what is beneficial about religion. Community, morality, decency, but not the things that are harmful like tribalism, superstition, irrational belief.